Another week, another batch of video game news for you. Welcome to Update X, where I give all of you a weekly recap of what's been going on in the gaming industry. I'm your host, Brandon Reshitar, at TheOnlyResh on Twitter and basically everywhere else. Today is Update 4.1 for April 6th, which includes The Last of Us Part 2 being delayed indefinitely, Phil Spencer giving more details about the Series X, Halo, Rockstar, and others helping out with coronavirus relief efforts, and so much more. Let's get into it. First story, we've got The Last of Us Part 2 delayed indefinitely, as well as Iron Man VR. Via PlayStation and Naughty Dog. PlayStation posted on Twitter April 2nd, SIE has made the difficult decision to delay the launch of The Last of Us Part 2 and Marvel's Iron Man VR until further notice. Logistically, the global crisis is preventing us from providing the launch experience our players deserve. Currently, there are no other delays to report, but we'll keep you updated. Naughty Dog on the same day said on Twitter, "The good news is, we're nearly done with the development of The Last of Us Part 2. We are in the midst of fixing our final bugs, however, even with us finishing the game, we were faced with the reality that due to logistics beyond our control, we couldn't launch The Last of Us Part 2 to our satisfaction. We want to make sure everyone gets to play The Last of Us Part 2 around the same time, ensuring that we're doing everything possible to preserve the best experience for everyone." So it's not totally surprising. It was really only a matter of time until this did happen with the coronavirus things and all that. Plus, it got initially delayed from February 21st to May 29th. And as far as them saying the best launch experience for everyone and being able to play at the same time, they're specifically referring to, I believe, to the Final Fantasy VII Remake launch, which launched 9 days early in Australia and Europe, because that's the only way that they could really see people in those parts of the world getting the game reliably. And Naughty Dog just didn't want to have that experience for the launch of their game, because they're expecting this to be a massive launch, that being The Last of Us 2, which everybody's been waiting for a really long time. There was a ton of crunch going on, which is why the initial delay happened. And the good news here is there will be a little bit less crunch now, hopefully. Granted, I would assume they're working from home, so they won't be able to put out the same amount of work as they would in the studio. But them not putting a date on it also, just saying indefinitely, means a little bit less crunch for all the devs who've been working ridiculously hard on this game for a long time. And another question that comes up with this delay is, what does that mean for Ghost of Tsushima? Because when The Last of Us Part 2 was initially delayed, that pushed Ghost of Tsushima back also, because that's the order they wanted to release these in. But in the statements on Twitter, they didn't say anything about Ghost of Tsushima, and I'm assuming that's because they didn't want to talk about another delay on top of the other two. So Ghost of Tsushima probably get delayed. We'll find out more as the summer goes on. And for what it's worth, right after the announcement of the delay, they released some new screenshots from The Last of Us 2. Some of the scenes were Ellie laying in bed with Dina, a few of Ellie on horseback with beautiful backgrounds. I love the look of this game. Joel playing guitar. Joel's looking a little bit older. Obviously, this game's 5 years, I believe, after the first Last of Us. So I'm putting the pictures up in the background here if you're watching on YouTube, but if you want to check the pictures out yourself, or if you're listening on the podcast, I'll put a link in the description to where you can get the pictures at. Or you can check out Update X Show on Twitter, where I retweeted him a little bit ago. And moving on from that, we got more info on the Series X from Phil Spencer in an interview with IGN's Ryan McCaffrey on April 1st. And they started out talking about possible delays for the Series X, but that was more of Ryan McCaffrey asking Phil if there were any delays for the Series X coming up. And Phil said, "The supply chain in China is coming back after the troubles that came from the coronavirus. The console hardware is still on track." He said if the Series X was delayed, it would be because of the software, not the hardware, that being the games like Halo Infinite, if somehow that wasn't ready, not the console itself. But he also said that's not likely. Ryan McCaffrey was really asking Phil all these what-if questions, and Phil was basically saying, we haven't talked about all those what-ifs because it's very unlikely, so Phil was just trying to come up with some kind of answer as a what-if. And when talking about the PS5 spec reveal, Phil said, quote, "I felt really good about how the Series X lines up. I think Mark and the team did some really good work on the audio processing that they talked about. Their SSD technology is impressive. We like that. We saw the work that they did, but we took a holistic view on our platform, from CPU to GPU to RAM to velocity architecture, latency, backwards compatibility. It took us years to get to this point, so I definitely have respect for any platform team that's launching, because it takes a lot of work." So he's basically saying his team had different priorities with the Xbox Series X as Sony did with the PlayStation 5, because Xbox has been making a huge point about backwards compatibility and making that very seamless as a transition from the Xbox One to the Series X, and bringing backwards compatibility from the original Xbox and Xbox 360 with it. Granted, PlayStation 5 has not been doing nearly as much of that since saying during the spec reveal for the PS5 that they will have most of the top 100 PS4 games playable on the PlayStation 5 at launch. But their wording's been really weird with that. They're not presenting it very well at all. So far, they're pretty bad with communicating about the PS5, but that's another story. Continuing with Phil Spencer's quote, "But I will say, when we saw the public disclosure, I felt even better about the choices we made on our platform, and I kind of expected that I would." So he gave props to Sony's work on the PS5, because it's still an impressive console. But Phil knows that more power is in the Series X, and Phil and Microsoft are very proud of their work, as they should be. It's an incredibly impressive console. And Phil expressed his confidence in the hardware team that's been working on the Series X. He said, quote, "If I give them the time and the targets to go hit, I believe in their ability to create a great end-to-end program." So he's got a great team working at Microsoft building this console. They've been really open about talking about it and giving the specs because they're really proud of this project, and so far they have practically nothing to hide. And when talking about the price of the console, Phil said, quote, "We're going to make sure we stay agile on our pricing." And I take that as they know what price they're aiming for, and they can adjust as necessary based on their competition, Sony and the PS5. Neither console has given a price yet. I'm assuming we're going to see a price for the Xbox come this summer in June when they do their digital event that was going to happen during E3. And if you didn't hear the story from a February article by Bloomberg, that one said, quote, "Scarce components have pushed the manufacturing costs for Sony Corp's next PlayStation to around $450 per unit." And comparing that to the PS4 launch price of $399, which was estimated to cost $381 to manufacture, the PS5 would have to cost at least $470 to hit a similar gross margin. And Sony could take the loss in profit to stay that much cheaper than the Series X if they wanted to, and launch at the same price as manufacturing at $450, but it's hard for me to guess how they'll handle it. I definitely don't see the Sony setting the price of the PS5 above $500, because they just don't want to be that expensive compared to the Series X, because they know they're not as powerful. And as far as the Series X goes, I don't see Microsoft setting that price below $500 with the amount of technology and power inside that box. SSD storage is very expensive, and the Series X has a 1 terabyte, while the PS5 has an 825 gigabyte SSD. Odd number, but that's what they went with. And then, of course, the teraflops that they've been talking about a lot. So I've seen a couple other people in the games journalism industry estimating as much as $600 or more for the Series X, based on how much power is in there, because they will take PC parts and kind of price it out versus the Xbox Series X stats. And one of the guys said, "I really don't see it being below $600 even." But in my mind, if they did launch at $600 or above, they would have to come out either at launch or soon after launch with another series, whether that be Series S or whatever, which is a less powerful equivalent to the Series X, just to have a cheaper option, because $600 is a big investment for most people for a gaming console. But keep in mind, Phil Spencer's been saying for a long time that Microsoft's console will not be out of position on power or price, because they know that they screwed up with the Xbox One being less powerful than the PS4 when they released, and being $100 more expensive. But hopefully they release a cheaper option at launch or soon after, so more people can get at the new Xbox consoles. Only time's going to tell on that. But moving on to another part of the interview with Phil Spencer, if you didn't know, there's not going to be an optical audio port in the Series X. For some people that really doesn't matter, because they don't use the optical audio port, and some people don't even know what it is or what it's for. Personally, I use it for my soundbar when I'm playing on my monitor as opposed to my TV, because I don't have speakers for my monitor. And that was the point that Phil brought up, is there's plenty of people that do use it, but not enough to justify putting the money forward to keep that in the next console. Because some people use it for the gaming headsets, and Phil Spencer said that Microsoft talked with Astro and other similar companies early on, and they're working together to enable existing devices through USB, because some people aren't going to be able to use their headsets if they need an optical audio port on the new console. So they're trying to work with that. It's really just a part of the never-ending battle of what to continue to have in the latest and greatest hardware and what to leave in the past. No matter how long you hold on to past hardware choices, though, there's always going to be people using it. Not everybody's going to be happy about the Switch or not continuing to put past technology in the new hardware. But the optical audio port is just the most recent example of this. Honestly, I think it's a good enough time to phase it out. I use it, but I'll find another way when I get the Series X, because I will get the Series X at some point. But moving on to the next story after the Phil Spencer interview, Resident Evil 8 will release in 2021 with serious series departures. This is from an article on videogameschronicle.com. I'm not familiar with the Resident Evil series. I haven't played those games. I've been meaning to since the remakes of 2 and 3 have come out. I just haven't got there yet. So I'm still getting all this info from the articles. I just don't have personal views on it. The article says 2021's Resident Evil 8 will be a first-person experience like 2017's Resident Evil 7 and will feature serious departures from other mainline entries. This info is provided by credited insider Dusk Gollum and verified by VGC. Resident Evil 8 will be a return for the previous game's protagonist, Ethan Winters. And getting to the, quote, serious departures from other mainline entries, this reportedly includes, quote, hallucination and insanity segments, as well as enemies based on mythical creatures such as werewolves. Dusk Gollum also revealed that the game was originally intended to be a third entry in Resident Evil's spin-off series Revelations, but following positive feedback from Capcom's testing department, it was decided that the game would be transmitted into a mainline installment. This is going to mark the third consecutive annual release for the series, following this month's Resident Evil 3 remake and 2019's Resident Evil 2 remake, which, quote, exceeded expectations with sales approaching 6 million units. The remakes have been doing pretty well. Resident Evil 2 remake got amazing reviews. Resident Evil 3, not as good reviews, but I think a lot of people have been saying that that's because Resident Evil 2, like the original, was better than Resident Evil 3, so you can only assume that Resident Evil 3 remake wouldn't get as good of reviews, because Resident Evil 3 got, I think IGN gave it a 9 out of 10, a bunch of other places gave it 7s or 8s, I think it got a couple 6s too, so not that good. Next story after that, Modern Warfare 2 Campaign Remaster was released for PS4. This comes from Taylor Lyles at The Verge. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 finally gets its remaster after a little over 10 years. But, of course, it's exclusive to PlayStation for the first month, because PlayStation just has to have those Call of Duty exclusives. And right now it's only the campaign that they remastered, it's not the multiplayer. But there's a report from The Gaming Revolution, a known and reliable Call of Duty insider, claiming that his source insisted that Activision is still testing Modern Warfare 2 Remastered's multiplayer. The Gaming Revolution also said, quote, I think this was all a test to see the community response, to be honest. So he wanted to see, or his view is that Activision wanted to see what the interest was in Modern Warfare 2 Remastered, which I don't see why they would think that it's anything less than a lot. But the remaster has got high-definition visuals and audio improvements to the original story from 2009, according to a blog post by Activision. The game's available digitally on PS4 for $19.99 US dollars. So I'm assuming it'll be the same price when it finally gets to Xbox and Battle.net players on PC, and that's going to be April 30th is when that's available for them. Pre-orders are not available at this time. To me, that price is exciting news, considering the remaster of the original Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4, was released exclusively in a bundle with Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, which a lot of people were very unhappy about that release. A lot of people did not want Infinite Warfare or any kind of game set even farther in the future from the previous games. And a lot of people weren't happy about it, the Modern Warfare remaster only being released in a bundle with that, but that's how Call of Duty wanted to get their sales, and it worked. Because at the time of launch, they said there were no plans to have it release as a standalone remaster outside of the bundle. But PS4 owners who purchased the remastered Modern Warfare 2 will also get in-game items in 2019's Modern Warfare, as well as in-game items in the free-to-play Battle Royale mode, Warzone. Some of the items in the bundle include a new character skin, a couple weapon blueprints, which reportedly grant you access to stronger weapons without having to earn them through progression. You could argue that's pay to win. Granted, you can still get the item through normal progression if you don't buy the remaster, but that's business. And I'm assuming you're going to get those same items if you get the remaster on Xbox and PC, but that just hasn't been talked about yet because it's not released for those yet. And a real quick continuation on the Call of Duty story, the Gaming Revolution also claims that Activision has plans to release 4 new games in the Modern Warfare sub-series, with each one focusing on certain characters such as Sandman, Ghost, Soap, etc. This is not by any means an official announcement, these are just claims from insiders, take all that with a grain of salt. That would be really interesting, considering the first Modern Warfare sub-series was just a trilogy, and 4 new games in Modern Warfare on top of the one that's already out, and with the rotation of Call of Duty titles being switching off every year between Modern Warfare, Black Ops, stuff like that, that would look at, another 8 years of Modern Warfare? So that'll be really interesting to see in the future. Moving on from Call of Duty, we've got Gearbox employees didn't get bonuses they were promised for working on Borderlands 3. This one sucks. It's a really bad situation for the employees there. This is from Jason Schreier at Kotaku. According to more than a dozen current and former Gearbox staff who have spoken to Kotaku over the years, Gearbox offers below-average salaries for the video game industry, but the studio offers profit sharing. Royalties from all of the developers' games are split 60-40, with 60% going back into the company and its owners, while 40% is distributed to employees in the form of quarterly bonuses. When Borderlands 2 released in 2012, many Gearbox workers made enough money to buy houses, which is a fact that the studio often touted while recruiting new employees. They're like, hey, last game came out, our employees bought a house with the bonus we gave them, so come on board. But since then, Gearbox has been struggling, failing to find much financial successes, with flops like Aliens, Colonial Marines in 2013, and Battleborn in 2016. As a result, quarterly bonuses have been smaller in recent years. This year that was supposed to change. Several Gearbox employees told Kotaku that the company management promised them 6-figure bonuses following the launch of Borderlands 3. The more years they'd been with the company, the larger the check. So, if they were pretty new to the company, maybe not get 6 figures, but a pretty hefty bonus. This helped Gearbox's developers get through many long nights and weekends working on the game. Then in a meeting, Gearbox boss Randy Pitchford told employees that Borderlands 3 bonus checks would be significantly lower than they'd hoped, according to 3 people who were present. He said the game had been more expensive than expected, the company had grown significantly larger than it had been in the past, it now operates a second studio in Quebec, Canada, and that their sales projections had been off base. The game did sell very well. Strauss Zelnick, CEO of 2K parent company Take-Two, said this on an earnings call in February. Quote, "We expect lifetime unit sales to be a record for the series, but the game costs way too much to make. One reason for that was halfway through development, they switched engines from Unreal Engine 3 to Unreal Engine 4, which added a lot of time onto the project. Because when you switch engines, starting over is not really a good option. So the devs have to learn how to use the new engine, all the new tools in it, anything like that, so that just adds time to development and stress on the workers. Also, before Gearbox could receive any royalties from publisher 2K, Borderlands 3 would have to recoup not just the game's entire budget, around $95 million, but also the budget for all of the DLC. So all that totals out to about $140 million. And this was all in a contract between the two companies. So basically, it costs $140 to make the game, and before they could receive any royalties, they had to make that much money back in sales and profits. And so far, that's really unfortunate to the devs, and as unfair as it sounds for the developers so far, this is where they really lose me. Randy Pitchford told Gearbox developers that if they weren't happy with the royalty system, they were welcome to quit, according to those who were in the meeting. He did not attribute diminished bonuses to the coronavirus pandemic. He did say that he hoped to get more money to employees as an advance from 2K on future royalties. I don't know if this was just poor choice of words on Randy Pitchford's part, or if he didn't really think that much of the situation. Because These employees just heard that their promised six-figure bonuses weren't coming to them, or at least were going to be a lot smaller. And a lot of employees had made financial decisions based on expecting to get this bonus. And his response was, if you don't like it, you can quit. That's just not the way to go about it, I think, at all. So a lot of people have been really on Pitchford on Twitter and all that in the last few days. So Gearbox said when asked for a comment, quote, "In the most recent pay period, Gearbox Talent enjoyed news that Borderlands 3, having earned revenue exceeding the largest investment ever made by the company into a single video game, had officially become a profitable video game, and the talent at Gearbox that participates in the royalty bonus system has now earned their first royalty bonus on that profit." So that quote saying their first royalty bonus on that profit, I'm hoping and assuming that means they're going to eventually get more, and this was just the first one. It wasn't as much as they thought it was going to be. So we'll see how that goes. But now things start to sound even worse, because last year, former Gearbox lawyer Wade Callender became entangled in an ugly set of lawsuits with the studio. In one suit, he alleged that Pitchford had taken a $12 million bonus in 2016 when development started on Borderlands 3. And according to two people with knowledge of what happened, that came out of the company's 60%, not the 40% of the profits that were meant to go to the employees. Still, the news of the smaller bonus combined with words of Pitchford's hefty bonus has left a number of Gearbox employees very unhappy. If you found out your boss had a $12 million bonus at the beginning of the development of this game, and then at the end you don't get the bonus that you were promised, it's understandable that they're extremely unhappy about this. And some of the employees expect an exodus in the near future because they're not about that. I'm not sure if that'll be a good number of Gearbox employees, but that'll probably come up with more news sometime in the future. And some of the employees who made financial plans based on the expectations set by the company's management, I get it. At the same time, to me personally, don't spend money you don't have. But at the same time, when they say they were promised larger bonuses, I don't know if that was actually in writing or if they were just verbally, possibly unofficially told that information. Because if it was in writing, that's a whole nother ball of wax. And that makes it that much worse. Currently, Gearbox is privately owned, but has been seeking to go public, according to two people familiar with the company's plans. It remains to be seen how this news will impact that. So, kind of bad on Randy Pitchford as far as just not handling the situation very well. Even if the money thing wasn't his fault, he didn't have to open up with just, hey, if you don't like it, you can quit. But following that up with some good news, coronavirus relief efforts by game companies and developers. So, a lot of games and companies have been doing really cool stuff to help out in the midst of the pandemic. I'm going to go through these kind of quick because there's a lot, and I'm not even going over all the ones that have been in the news. So Halo 5's got a new $10 rec pack called Relief and Recovery that contains in-game items to use in multiplayer. Until April 30th, Microsoft is donating all proceeds from the pack purchases to Global Giving's Coronavirus Relief Fund. And Rockstar Games is donating 5% of revenue from in-game purchases in GTA 5 and Red Dead Online to COVID-19 relief efforts from April 1st through the end of May. Some people have said that 5% isn't much and they should give more, but you got to think about the amount that Rockstar makes on GTA and Red Dead, because analysts were looking at these numbers as a possible $1.8 to $2 million a month in that 5%. So it's still a good chunk either way. Sony has set up a global relief fund for COVID-19 worth the equivalent of £80 million or $98,160,000 US dollars. Nintendo donated 9,500 face masks to the state of Washington. Ubisoft has donated £120,000 or about $147,000 US dollars to the World Health Organization's COVID-19 relief fund. And Ubisoft has also been giving away a lot of free games to people stuck at home, which is really cool. The Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077 developer CD Projekt donated £767,000 or about $941,000 US dollars to the Polish healthcare system. League of Legends publisher Riot Games has donated £1.2 million or about $1.47 million US dollars to relief efforts in the LA area. Fortnite player Ninja donated 120,000 pounds, or about 147,000 US dollars, to food bank charity Feeding America. And lastly, there was a Humble Bundle available for purchase all of last week into this weekend that had over $1,000 of games and ebooks for just $30, and all of the money is going to organizations responding to COVID-19. At the time of me writing the notes here, they've raised $4.8 million, which is incredible. Unfortunately, it's over. The Humble Bundle deal is over by the time this episode is going to be out, but I post info for all things like that when I see them on Twitter. So if you follow the show, Update X Show on Twitter, or my personal Twitter at TheOnlyResh for anything like that I see in the future. I got the Humble Bundle yesterday. I downloaded it. So yeah, donate $30. You can choose how much of that $30 goes towards the different things they're donating to. And yeah, you get the email confirming your order, and then you go back to the Humble Bundle website, and it's just got all these Steam codes for you to redeem on Steam for all these games. You just click redeem, and all the games are added to your library. It's awesome. Next story, Final Fantasy VII Remake trailer has spoilers. This is from Alessandro Barbosa at GameSpot. Yes, spoilers happen even on games that are 20 plus years old. So the latest launch trailer for the Final Fantasy VII Remake is just over 4 minutes long and shows off a lot. It starts off with a callback to the series' great PSP prequel, Crisis Core, and continues delving into very specific stories for each of its main characters. There are reveals that are decades old at this point, but it also showcases some new wrinkles that Square Enix is adding to this greatly expanded Midgard chapter. The weird thing is, to me, is since Final Fantasy VII Remake got released 9 days early in Australia and Europe, Square Enix has been asking fans to avoid spreading potential spoilers after physical copies went on sale earlier. So this trailer having new spoilers makes even less sense to me since they released the game early. And I haven't played the Final Fantasy games either, so I can't speak as to how bad the spoilers are for this game. But they're bad enough for a lot of people online to warn fellow fans about the most recent trailer. So basically, if you're planning on playing Final Fantasy VII Remake and you don't want new spoilers, do not watch the new launch trailer for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Moving on from that, we got PlayStation slowing download speeds in the US. This is from Megan Farokhmanesh at The Verge. Sony's working with internet service providers in the US to slow game download speeds in an effort to preserve internet capacity for users overall, the company announced on its blog. Sony had done the same thing a few days earlier in Europe, they just hadn't done it to the US yet. So basically, downloading a game on PlayStation will be somewhat slower or delayed, but Sony stated that gameplay online will remain robust. And companies like Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, Apple, and Disney have all reduced video streaming quality to help with the strain from millions of people being stuck at home due to the coronavirus pandemic. Sony's post says, quote, "We will continue to take appropriate actions to do our part to help ensure internet stability as this unprecedented situation continues to evolve." Now, Microsoft hasn't said if they're doing the same thing with their download speeds or not. I tried to look around the internet a little bit. I didn't find anything. To a certain point, it's good that you're trying to reduce the tax on bandwidth that's happening right now, since I think if one of the articles I read was right, gaming is up like 700% since all the stay-at-home policies have been put into effect. So it makes sense because everybody's online right now. Moving on from that, IGN announces Summer of Gaming event in June. This is from Jonathan Dornbush at IGN. So we all know E3 is canceled. That got canceled a while ago, later than it should have been canceled, but better late than never. And we have yet to hear from any of the people from E3 about whether they're going to do a digital event or what their plans are for it. I don't know why. They've been extremely quiet about it. It's been a good minute since they canceled it. But in the wake of that, IGN has stepped up to plan their own digital event to begin in June, where they will bring news and impressions around upcoming games and the next generation of console hardware. IGN will collaborate with many partners for the Summer of Gaming event, including 2K, Square Enix, Sega, Bandai Namco, Amazon, Google Stadia, Twitter, Devolver Digital, THQ Nordic, and more. The event will include live broadcasts and on-demand programming featuring IGN's editorial coverage of the work of game developers from around the world. IGN's live programming can be accessed on any one of IGN's more than 20 platforms, including desktop, mobile, OTT, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Mixer, Twitch, Snapchat Discover, TikTok, and more. So I'm glad we're finally getting some confirmation on some digital events that are happening, since everything, like every physical event, is being canceled. And Microsoft also having their digital event this summer around the time E3 was supposed to be. And now IGN making their event. I'm glad we're finally getting some more like news coverage and confirmation that things are going to happen still. Sony being extremely quiet still. Not saying if they're going to have a digital event or anything. I'm assuming Sony's going to have an event or some kind of information release after Microsoft's event, because I think they're waiting to hear about Microsoft's like further Xbox Series X plans and pricing and all that. I'm definitely going to be looking at everything going on for the IGN event, the Microsoft event, any other thing that's going on this summer, and I'll be definitely covering it in future Update X episodes. And that being it for the news today, we're going to get on to some non-news stuff. Gaming deals that have been going on recently. Microsoft has a spring sale that's going on through April 13th, where you can get an Xbox One X 1TB bundled with either Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, NBA 2K20 Special Edition, or Forza Horizon 4 Lego Speed Champions for $300. So if you've been waiting to get a newer console and $300 is in your budget, I would say now's the time, especially if you're not going to get the new console right away, because it's the best version of the Xbox One that's out right now, and you get a free one of the really good games that's out right now with it. Xbox Game Pass is still doing the $1 for the first month deal, which I feel like they've been doing that every month since Game Pass was a thing. And I'm not sure if they're still doing this or if this is still possible, but there is a loophole that some people have done where so theoretically how it works is when you do the $1 deal for the first month of Xbox Game Pass, that turns the rest of your Xbox Live Gold membership into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, meaning Game Pass and Xbox Live Gold. So theoretically, paying the $1 converts to the rest of your Xbox Live into Game Pass. And if you pre-purchase Xbox Live Gold for, I think the max is 3 years. So if you pay for 2 to 3 years of Xbox Gold, pay the $1 for Game Pass, then you just have Game Pass for the next 2 to 3 years. I would look up online on Google, look up some more articles on if that's still a thing you can do, still a little loophole for you, but some people have done it and they paid $1 for 3 years of Game Pass, so not a bad deal. Nintendo has a Spring 2020 eShop sale with discounts on Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, Spyro Reignited Trilogy, and more. Sony has a spring sale through April 28th with some decent discounts on games. $16 off Modern Warfare, $36 off Mortal Kombat 11, $14 off Jedi Fallen Order. And in each Update X episode, I'm going to go through what games have come out in the past week and what games are going to be coming out in the next week. And I get all these from Metacritic. Big games that have come out in the last week. Persona 5 Royal for PS4 came out on March 31st, sitting at 95 on Metacritic. The Resident Evil 3 remake got an 81 on PS4, got an 85 on Xbox One, got a 78 on PC. That came out April 3rd. And games coming out in the next week. Below is coming to PS4 April 7th. Disaster Report 4 Summer Memories is coming out April 7th on PS4, Switch, and PC. And the Final Fantasy VII Remake coming out on PS4 April 10th. That's it for the games last week and this next week. And just because I go through what I've been playing for this last week at the end of the show, Doom 2016 I started playing again because I never finished Doom 2016, and Doom Eternal has been getting incredible reviews. So I want to get to that, but I want to finish Doom 2016 first, and possibly, not probable, but by the time I finish Doom 2016, maybe I'll be able to find Doom Eternal cheaper somewhere. I've been playing Animal Crossing on my Switch. It's my guilty pleasure. I was never interested in Animal Crossing on like GameCube and DS and all that stuff. For some reason, I just really wanted it on the Switch, so I've been playing that this week. A lot of Warzone with some buddies. My Friend Pedro, which is on Game Pass, which is a fun little side-scroller shooter to screw around in. And I started Untitled Goose Game because it got all these Game of the Year nominations and all this crazy stuff somehow. so I had to get in it and see what's going on. I'm not very far. I've played it for about 20 minutes, but after all that, this has been your update 4.1 for April 6th, 2020. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube or for listening on podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you want to get more frequent gaming news posts from me in between episodes, you can follow me or follow the show's page on Twitter at UpdateXShow. You can also give me any feedback or suggestions you have about the show while you're there. Outside of game news, I post gaming clips for laughs on TikTok at TheOnlyResh. If you want to check out my personal Twitter page, is also at TheOnlyResh, where I post not strictly news-related stuff, but the other gaming content. Thank you so much for listening to my first ever podcast episode. I'm planning on uploading these every week on Monday mornings, so people can listen to it on their way to work or plan around that. As always, thank you so much for choosing Update X for your gaming news. I'll see you next week. Have a great one.